Good evening. It being 6 p.m, I declare this special council meeting, the Shire of Capel Council, 1st of June, open. We wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land we are meeting on, the Nala Kala Buja and the Southwest Bujara people. We wish to acknowledge and respect their continuing connection to the land, waters and community. We pay our respects to members of all communities and cultures and to elders past, present and emerging. We have a couple of apologies, and that is Councillor Kitchen and Councillor Andrew, and we have Councillor Murray on leave of absence, so we're a bit thin on the ground, but we have a quorum, which is good. Are there any declarations of interest? I hope not. Okay, we move to public question time, and I believe Mr. Petrosevic has some couple of questions for us. You better say the correct pronunciation of your name. I reckon I got that wrong.
Petrosevic.
Petrosevic, okay.
My name's Philip Petrosevic. I'm from Canning Vale, and I'm manager of S&C Livestock. President Southwell, our first question is, why are the negotiations for a new lease of Boynup Sale Yards being brought forward, considering that the current lease does not expire until June 2022, and given the ongoing investigation by the ACCC, reference 3267294, into anti-competitive conduct by Walser at the Boynup Sale Yards, which could produce an outcome which would cause disruption to the industry and would not be in the best interests of local producers.
Okay, the first part of your question I'll refer to the acting CEO, and the second part of your question I was unaware of that until you mentioned it to me now. So I'll ask the acting CEO if he can shed some light.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your question. The process of lease negotiations can be lengthy when a council may decide that it wants to offer a lease to a particular lessee rather than go to public tender. The requirement to call for submissions could raise matters for the council to consider further, such as access to the yards by all producers. The council does not want to cause any disruption to local producers.
Your second question?
Yes. Will the Shire of Capel be placing clauses, provisions in the lease to provide accountability by Walser and to ensure the approximate $3.5 million required for upgrades is spent at the Boynup Sale Yards, with a requirement that proof is obtained that the funds are being spent within a certain time frame, given the statement by the Agricultural Minister in an ABC podcast on the 28th of January 2022 that a long-term lease was being offered in lieu of Walser spending the $3.5 million on upgrades so the yards would meet current standards.
Okay, well, the Shire can't be held sort of accountable, and we don't take any responsibility for the statements made by the Minister. In answer to the first part of your question, you know, a prudent operator would include those sort of provisions in a lease, and we haven't seen a potential lease yet, but I'm hoping that they would cover those sort of eventualities and close off all those loopholes. And if there's anything else the acting CEO would like to add, I'll let him do it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you once again for the question. A meeting has been held with the representatives of the proposed lessees, and the issue of improvements at the Boynup Yards has been raised. Notwithstanding positive responses regarding improvements, the Council may need to seek legal advice relating to the incorporation of clauses or provisions in the lease relating to this matter as to the council's legal ability to incorporate such clauses or provisions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Petricevic. We now move to tonight's business, the reports. The first is the issue of the Boyne-up sale yards. Do I have somebody wishing to move the officer's recommendation? Councillor Sciano, seconded. Councillor Noonan. Councillor Sciano.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I guess obviously tonight to clarify is not to, provide the authority to affix the common seal on the lease. It's obviously to let the community know or let the public know of our intentions to potentially continue that lease with Walser. And also, obviously, to invite those submissions. Council, I think, is aware of, I guess, our requirements and aware of the ensuring that we could potentially need to create a competitive environment. And this, I think, was my understanding is the intention of allowing, making our intentions clear with Walser, so that potentially competitors or others who do wish to use the site can make a submission. So I think the council is definitely taking into consideration the right for competitiveness within that market. I do have major concerns, obviously, around the sale yards and playing political games with them. I think that the back and forth between various ministers and changes of government and the current government's, I guess, lack of support for providing a state-of-the-art facility in Boyne-up means that if we aren't on top of this as early as we can be, and that we aren't working with Walser now, and potentially if we do leave this disrupting this facility or the use of this facility for farmers in the southwest, I think the government swooping in, or potentially a lot of farmers up in further north to Perth are obviously fighting for this site to be moved to Kemerton. So I think that we need to take every step we can responsibly to ensure that this site continues to function and function efficiently, and that we have a strong position on the future of this site, so that when the time does come, the government will be here with a clear vision of what we want and where we want to go, and we can fight to ensure that a future state-of-the-art site doesn't go to Kemerton, stays here in Boyne-up. Personally, I think Walser have obviously been there for a significant amount of time. We've had these conversations with them about competition before, but obviously support the officer's recommendation tonight and look forward to the submissions from others that I'm sure will come for review from the 28th of July.
Just firstly, I'd like to ask a question of the acting CEO, and that is, I prefaced it by saying I do recollect that we have had some council, informal discussions around this, and various options have been floated at those discussions, such as opening up for tender this time around, and also we even talked about the idea of perhaps the council itself should resume control of the sale yards and be the operator. And I'm wondering why we haven't had anything formal, and there's no sort of background on those options. Those options are not canvassed in this in the background of this report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll have to be careful that I don't go into any commercial confidentiality side of things, but the information that has been provided to me is that all the improvements situated on the Boyne-up sale yards are not owned by the Shire of Capel. Therefore, since they're owned by another party, it would be difficult for the council to commence a sale yards operations itself, although I should add, not impossible. However, I do believe that if the council did take it on itself, we would be faced with those same compliance issues with regard to environmental issues animal safety, those type of things that we believe at the moment would become or would continue to be the responsibilities of the lessee. If the owner of the improvements on the property decided to take those away, that is, if the council couldn't negotiate the purchase of those improvements, I would imagine that there would be quite a lengthy lead time between the time that those improvements were removed and the council was able to construct new facilities, which I think would cause some disruption to the cattle industry in the southwest. Does that answer?
The other part of my question was why hasn't the idea of a tender process been canvassed?
Yes, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. For similar reasons, in that the infrastructure on the land is owned by a party that's not us. Therefore, if we went out to tender, all we would be offering during that tender process was the land itself. That is, we have no right to offer the improvements there as part of that tender because we, in fact, that is the Shire of Capel, doesn't own those improvements. Therefore, if we went out to a normal Section 3.58 process where you invite the world to treat with you, we would have to be saying that we're offering the land only, and a successful potential lessee would have to negotiate with the owner of that land if they wanted to continue to run a sale yards. And since the land is vested in the Shire of Capel for the purpose of sale yards, it would be difficult for anything else to be run there.
Okay, just another question. What has happened to the various discussions over the journey of perhaps the state government helping with a new site in Boynup?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The state government, from the minister's point of view, at the moment and through media releases, is indicating that the minister is not in favour of, at present, build or investing capital money in new facilities. The minister is of the opinion that in real life, if I can put it that way, in real life cattle sales are fast becoming an anachronism. I'm saying that's the minister's opinion, that's not necessarily anybody else's opinion. But because it's the minister's opinion and she has control of the purse strings, she has indicated that she doesn't want to give any more capital money for the development either in another shire or for the one in the Shire of Capel. Therefore, to go back to your earlier question, if we had a desire to become involved ourselves and do a Mount Barker model, if I can put it that way, it would most likely, in my opinion, require quite a good deal of capital input by the Shire itself rather than relying on capital grants from the state government.
Thank you. Councillor Clues.
Thank you, Mr. President. A question also, if I may, through you. I'm curious, was the CEO, or acting CEO, aware prior to today of this issue? We've now been raised tonight about the CCC being involved with an investigation.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Clues. No, I only became aware of that issue today when I saw the question that we received in public question time. And when we did a search on that reference number that was provided for us, thanks very much, we couldn't find anything. However, councillors may recall that I made a presentation regarding options relating to the Boynup sale yards, and during that presentation I did make some confidential references to legal advice that I had received, not paid for by the Shire of Capel, I might add, indicating that yes, there are potential issues there with regard to potential for restraint of trade, but Mr. Chairman, I prefer not to go into that any deeper now while we're in public session.
Thank you. A follow-up, if I may. So now being aware of potentially some CCC investigation, does the acting CEO think it might be prudent that we defer this item tonight at least until next month, and if not further until the outcome of that investigation, particularly being that it's been pointed out we're probably going to require some legal advice in this area, and potentially the outcome of that CCC investigation may provide us just the advice we need.
If you don't mind, I'll attempt to answer that question, because I think where you're going with that is really it's a decision for council. If it's before this matter is before us tonight, and if council wishes to decide to defer it, if council so decides, then it will be deferred. And I think this is an officer recommendation, and I think it's from the CEO, acting CEO. So obviously the position is that's been put before us tonight, right? So I think it's council's decision, and I'd rather we make the decision than the acting CEO, because I think that if he answers that question, he would be essentially taking part in a preemptive part of a debate that might be held on whether to defer it or not. Do you see what I mean?
If I may, I do see what you mean. My concern is that the CEO no doubt filled this report and provided it to council prior to this information that's now come of light today.
Yes, so we know that, and anyway, we're now getting into a sort of tic-tac-toe. So if you've got any questions, you can ask them.
In which case, I'll move a procedural motion 12.1A that the item be deferred to the next ordinary council meeting.
I'll second it. Councillor Clues, you've probably outlined your reasons, or do you want to go further?
Yeah, I think with in light of what is obviously new information to both us and the CEO, I think it would be prudent and good responsible behaviour to ensure that all these facts are accounted for before making a decision on this matter. So that being the case, I think it's best we allow time to do that.
Sorry, did the minute taker get that it's deferred to the next ordinary council meeting? Thank you. We'll now move to the second item, and that is the Meadowbrook Lifestyle, the application for an amendment waiving its developer contribution. Do I have a mover? Councillor Noonan. A seconder? Councillor Sciano. Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll move the officer's recommendation as read.
You've moved it as read. You've got a seconder. Do you wish to speak to the matter?
Thank you, Mr. President. No, I think we have discussed it in previous meetings, and I think that the officer's recommendation is a sensible one, and it's a reasonable request, reasonable thing for us to do. So I commend it to the council.
Okay, I'd speak against the motion because I'm just not comfortable with a developer contribution that's been agreed to in the past, just being waived because circumstances have changed since then. I mean, circumstances can always change. It doesn't mean that when we ask and it's agreed that we get a developer contribution, that it should be waived later just because historical events didn't unfold as expected. I just think that what we're basically doing here is saying goodbye to what's the figure? $245,000. We're saying goodbye to $245,000 that could be used for footpaths, community facilities and services. And the rationale in here is that, well, the Shire doesn't have enough plans on foot and is not spending enough money to justify the co-contribution. But I don't think that, to me, that doesn't sound like there is nothing being done in Boynup. There is no community development going on there. There are plans for things being done, and there has been things done. For instance, the resurfacing of the sports courts over there. And now I think I saw recently we agreed to put in our works program that we would upgrade the area around the bridge. So there is things being done, and I don't understand. I've read through this, and I still don't understand why we are saying that things have changed now, and the developer can keep their $245,000, which is basically a windfall for them when they would have factored this into the agreements that were made at the time that they went ahead with their development. So I'm not in favour. Anyone else? Councillor Clues.
Thank you, Mr. President. I agree with Councillor Southwell. I think there's plenty of things to do. There's plenty of things in the plans for Boynup. Fettlers Park has got a multi-staged, potential, quite large development on the cards. To say there's nothing we can spend money on in Boynup, I think would be doing a massive injustice to the town side of Boynup. I think this would be a huge loss for them. And then of course you've got the basic question of it is when do you start accepting that we don't need to accept developer contributions from people, that this is just how it works. Next, we don't need sadly they might start putting in applications to remove their developer contributions. I don't think this is a good practice to begin getting in.
Any other speakers for or against? If not, we'll put it to the vote. Those in favour of the motion as moved. And those against? That's lost. 1-4. Thank you. There being no further business, I'll...
and possibly a 2 or 3 minute adjournment to the meeting, Mr. Chairman,
Yep.
might be a good idea if you
I
don't
was,
mind.
yeah,
just so can
I
confirm.
was just going to say that. So before I close the meeting, we'll call a 5-minute adjournment so we can sort this out. And if we need to, we'll have a form of words that we can look at in terms of doing that. Okay, so I'll adjourn for 5 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So 5 minutes having expired, we'll reopen the meeting, and I'm advised there's no further action, no requirement for any further action. So I'll close the meeting at 6:32 p.m. Cheers. Thanks.